We're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting, the Overview and Scrutiny meeting. As you can see, this is a virtual meeting being conducted with members and officers at various locations, communicating by audio and video online. Before the meeting starts, I would like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings will work and to confirm that members and officers are in attendance. Marie?
Good evening. I apologise, my camera is not working this evening, so I apologise for that. I'm going to do a roll call first, if I may. So I have Councillor Kate Aspinwall.
Present.
Val Bryant.
Present.
Sam Collins.
Hello.
Terry Hone.
I'm here.
Tony Hunter. Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Levitt.
Present.
Councillor McNally.
Present.
Councillor Nash.
Present.
Councillor Nguala.
Present.
Councillor Ruggiero Kakir.
Present.
Councillor Strong.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Tyson, I haven't seen. Councillor Tyson.
Present.
Oh, thank you. And officers, I should have Rachel Cooper.
Present.
Anthony Roche.
Yeah, present.
Jeanette Thompson.
Present.
Sarah Kingsley.
Present.
I think I saw Vaughan Watson.
Present.
Hello, and I think we're waiting for Chloe Hipwood, who will be arriving later. So, live streaming. The meeting is being live streamed on the council's YouTube channel. If streaming fails, the meeting will adjourn. If the live stream cannot be restored within a reasonable period, then the remaining business will be considered at a time and date fixed by the chair. If the chair does not fix a date, the remaining business will be considered at the next ordinary meeting. If for any reason the meeting is not quorate, an officer will notify attendees by interjecting the meeting. The meeting will adjourn immediately. Once the meeting is quorate, the meeting will resume. If connection cannot be restored within a reasonable period, then the remaining business will be considered at a time and date fixed by the chair. If the chair does not fix a date, the remaining business will be considered at the next ordinary meeting. Only members present for the entire debate and consideration of an item are entitled to vote. If technology fails for a member during the debate and they rejoin the meeting, they will not be able to vote on that item. If a member drops out of the meeting and is unable to reconnect, I have actually sent all members an email with phone numbers on, which you can use as a last resort. Please note this is only for if you are unable to connect again to the meeting. Please ensure that your electronic devices are muted. Please activate the mute button on your tablet or your computer when you are not speaking. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the raise hand button located in participants. And this will alert the host that you wish to speak, and the host will inform the chair of the names of the speakers. Please do not use the reactions hand symbol. Voting. If the committee decides to take a vote, this will be via the green tick for yes, red cross for no, and blue raise hand for abstain, which are located in the participant section at the bottom of your screen. To enable votes to be counted, please do not clear your votes until you are requested to do so. Details of how members voted will not be kept or minuted unless a recorded vote has been requested or an individual member has requested that their vote be recorded. The committee member and scrutiny manager will clearly state the result of the vote, and the chair will proceed to the next agenda item. There is a part 2 paper for the meeting this evening. When the committee has resolved to move to part 2, the host will invite committee members and relevant officers to join them in a breakout room, which you will need to accept. You will automatically then be transferred into that breakout room, and that's where the discussions will be held. There might be, and probably will be, a short delay whilst the host administers this and you're all transferred. Once the part 2 discussions have concluded, members will need to move back into the part 1 meeting. Whilst the part 2 discussions have happened on live stream, the meeting will not have ceased. It will be continued, but with a holding page on YouTube. To leave the breakout room, you will need to leave the room, and then it gives you 2 options. Make sure you choose leave breakout room, not leave the meeting, please. The system will then automatically redirect you to the public part of the meeting. Are there any questions before we start? No. Okay, I will hand over to the chair, Councillor Levitz.
Thank you, Hilary. So welcome to the first meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee in the 2021 civic year. Just before we move on with the other bits, due to the changes in the Constitution we voted through at full council last week, one of the options the chairman of a meeting has is if a member drops out for technical reasons, any reasons, the chair has a discretion to just hold the meeting for a few minutes while the member tries to establish contact. To make sure everybody can have proper democratic vote and everything, I intend to exercise that option tonight. So if we lose anybody, if I'm not aware, if somebody could make me aware, I will just hold proceedings for a maximum of 5 minutes to allow that member to reconnect, and we'll pick up from where we lost the connection with that member, so everybody gets a chance to take full part in the debate and vote at the end of it. Is that okay with everybody? No questions on that? No, thank you. In accordance with the council policy, In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recordings will be available to view on ModGov, and the film recording via the NHDC YouTube channel. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. I'm going to take item 16, the part 2 item after item 15, garden waste collection service. We will then come back into part 1 and take item 15, the related part 1 item. Sam, while we're at that point, I take your point, but there is stuff in there that I think I think we will keep in part 2. I do take your point. I'm going to take so public participation. We have none. Item 5, urgent general exception items. I have, as chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, agreed to 1 urgent item to be considered this evening and by Cabinet on the 23rd of June 2020, this being the part 1 and part 2 items later on in the agenda regarding the commercial waste arrangements. Item 6, called in items. There are none. Item 7, resolutions of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Hilary to present. Just to make sure that everybody had the supplementary bit on that, which has the resolutions with the dead ones removed, so you can see exactly what's left on there. Okay, Hilary. I think you're on mute, Hilary.
Sorry about that. I was only going to draw attention to the fact that there's 2 versions of the report. One shows all the items, including those that are to be removed. The other shows the items that shows it as if all the items had been removed. So it gives you a clearer picture of what's left. On page 6, the waste task and finish group, I'll talk about that in the work programme if that's all right, rather than here. and on page 9, the Hitching Town Hall closure report. I just need to make a correction to that. The report was actually published back in March on the agenda, the closure report. So members have seen it, and I know there wasn't a meeting, but they were consulted. So you have all seen that closure report now, and I will, yes, presume that that's no longer an issue. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Have you got any questions?
Thank you, Hilary. Do we have any questions from anybody? I don't see any hands up at the moment. Okay, in that case, there is nothing to vote on that one, so just take it that that report is noted. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8.
Okay.
Overview and scrutiny work programme. Hilary, to present again, please.
Thank you. So on the work programme, I'll draw attention to paragraph 8.1 under Appendix A. The annual report didn't go to annual council this year. I will be bringing a draft copy of the annual report to the next meeting of the committee for you to consider, as the chair has asked this be reported to a future meeting of council. And obviously the committee would like to see that before it goes to any future meeting of council. On the forward plan, there's a forward plan been published for the 8th of June. I think I put the 5th of June in the papers, for which I apologise. So it's for the committee to identify any items from the forward plan that they would wish to consider. The HTH review, as I stated in the resolutions report, the paragraph needs to be amended, as this was published as part of the March agenda. And although the meeting was cancelled, all members were consulted. Paragraph 8.5 to 8.12, protocol on task and finish groups. Due to the COVID-19 situation, I have not yet managed to allocate time with the service director for waste, service manager for waste, to draw up any scoping documents. This type of review will require a lot of evidence being gathered from many people, from lots of organisations and from various areas, including canvassing members of the public. And I think the committee needs to give some thought as to how this could be achieved in the current circumstances, or whether the review should be postponed to enable us to get a better engagement with the public. And the last thing I want to draw attention to is paragraph 8.1.13, which is the task and finish protocol. The current protocol for task and finish groups was agreed in 2016. And since this time, the committee has opted to undertake task and finish group reviews using different methods and receiving reports in different ways, meaning that the protocol has actually not been adhered to by the committee. It seems sensible to wait for the outcome of the peer challenge, which you're going to see the action plan tonight, in case this had an impact on how the committee would wish to view future task and finish groups. I therefore intend to draw up a revised protocol for consideration and bring it to the committee as soon as possible. If there's any questions, thank you.
Do we have any questions for Hilary before I open this up for general discussion? I can't see anybody with a hand up at the moment. No. Okay, there's a couple of things I'd like to pick up on this report. The first one is looking at the forward plan under 8.3, potential topics for consideration. Now, the peer review picked up on that we should be scrutinising more with our outside partners and bringing them in to talk to overview and scrutiny about their work. So if there's any suggestions as to who we could pick up on that one, I'd like to hear those. I thought perhaps bringing in somebody from the local enterprise partnership would be a good thing. We've got quite a strong relationship with them. And I don't think we've ever really seen them at council or anything. In view of the importance of that relationship, I think it might be a good time to bring them in, sooner the better really, to overview and scrutiny, and bring them into one of the meetings and see what they have to say. So that's one suggestion. Claire, I've got your hand up. Claire Strong.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it was just really looking at the work programme and the task and finish groups on the waste contract, and something that went wrong a couple of years ago. I just remember at the time going to a scrutiny meeting as chair of Southern Rural, where we had collected as the councillors on Southern Rural. I think the Hitching committee did it as well. And we took all the comments from councillors and I presented them to the then scrutiny committee. At that scrutiny committee was the representation from the new contractors, and they went through in a lot of detail about why they had so many issues on day one that the contract switched across to them. And I'm going back a couple of years now, I'm just concerned that with resourcing, time consuming as if to do a review where we're going to go into a lot of communication with people about what went wrong 2 years ago. I think we know, I certainly know what went wrong in my ward, and I expressed that to the scrutiny committee at the moment. There were issues. I think those were fairly well broadcast to all members on the council at the time. And there was a lot of learnings that I think at the time were taken away. And I can't quite get my understanding of what this review is actually going to achieve in light of where we are and where we want to go. And also having had the peer review, going back into the past, I just don't feel as there's a relevance. The part that I am concerned about, though, on this, which was one of the other reviews, was about the engagement and also communications. And I would like to see a review that looks at engagement and communications, but not restricted just to how it was done on the waste contract. I'd like to see it to be done across all services of the council in all events. I mean, we've had a very difficult period as a council, as has the whole country. And again, I think we could be looking at how we've been communicating, particularly with the impact of COVID-19 on a council, and how successful we feel those communications of services, of how our members of the public have been able to get services from us in this difficult period. I mean, there isn't, I think, an appetite to go back. I would like an appetite to what's here and now, and what we could learn from that and what we could be doing better. But anyway, that's just my view. So, I mean, I would support that we need a communication and engagement with the public, but across the board, not restricted to the waste contract that was 2-3 years ago.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Kate, then Sam, then Tony.
Thank you, Chair.
Kate, you're breaking up quite badly.
Okay. My point was around, I think there is a great deal of relevance in looking back and learning from history. And there's quite a lot going on in current times that's telling us that that is exactly what we should be doing. The contract piece was obviously a very large part of the issues that we then faced as a council, and that we continue to face now. And I think it's absolutely imperative that we scrutinise that, as is our function, and understand what lessons can be learned. If no lessons come out of that, well, then how joyous. But I think that if we don't look, we are making a very serious error and failing in our function as overview and scrutiny.
Okay, Sam.
Yeah, echoing most of what Kate just said, actually. I think to say there's no lessons to be learned from the waste situation is just not accurate. There's still an awful lot to be learned in terms of the contract, in terms of public engagement. And, you know, in a few years, we're going to have to do all of this again and look at a new contract and put that out to tender again. So I suspect that we need to learn those lessons. So I absolutely think we do need to do these groups. The question you asked, Chair, was, is now the right time? Are we able to canvass the public and have those discussions with wider groups in the current situation. And I have to say, I'm personally leaning towards a postponement on that, just because we're not going to be able to engage with the public in the way we need to. To answer Councillor Strong's point about a wider panel on engaging the public, I actually do think that's a good idea, in addition to one specifically on waste. The council can do more in terms of communication, and I think that's not a terrible idea at all.
Okay, Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it was the point you brought up about the local enterprise partnership being one of the outside bodies. I would suggest another one, Settle, the Housing Association. We've seen an awful lot of changes with Settle over the last few years, and the head count seems to be a different name every time I try to contact them. And I think it would be useful that we sort of cemented relationships with councillors and contacts, because it gets ever more difficult to actually get answers on different things that are always around the Settle umbrella.
Thank you for that. That's quite a good idea. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's go back.
Courtesy of a colleague, David.
Right. Let's go back onto the waste contract bit. Clay, you've still got your hand up. Do you want us to come back in on that one? You're on mute, Claire.
Sorry, I'm trying to find the right buttons. No, I forgot to cancel my my button. Sorry about that. Apologies.
Okay, and Tony, can you take your hand down as well? Thank you. Okay. I can see both sides of the argument on this with the waste contract. Yes, it is best part of 3 years ago now, but as Kate said, there are lessons to be learned. I think the points about the community engagement and taking it wider are very valid, actually, particularly when we will come to the report on the district-wide survey later on, and some of that centres around public engagement and websites and that. I've got a couple of suggestions. I think we're going to take a vote on a couple of bits here to see where we go on it. Let's look at it in two ways. Do we continue with the task and finish group on tender and contract, which we could learn the lessons on the approaches and the way the contract tender was handled? And as a second vote, the community engagement one, do we do it just in relation to waste contract, or should we widen it up? So let's try. Are you ready to take the vote on these, Hurry?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so the first one is, do we continue at a date to be determined at suitable time still, the task and finish group on tender and contract? All those in favour, please show with the yes button.
So the green tick is yes, the red cross is you don't agree, and the raise your hand symbol, blue symbol, is to abstain. If I can ask you all to vote, please.
I have.
Everybody voted. So that's carried.
That's carried. So we carry on with that one. The second one, community engagement. I'll make it quite simple to start with. Do we relate it purely to the waste contract? Yes or no, for or against?
So if you all want to vote, same again, green tick for yes, red cross no, and blue hand to abstain, please. Okay, that's not agreed.
Okay, it's not agreed. So second part of the vote on that one, do we look at a wider task and finish group on on community engagement? All those in favour? Get back up.
That's carried, Chair. So that's to do a task and finish on a wider communications issues.
Yep. So we'll rearrange. We'll go around and rearrange that one and get some nominations from various groups on that one. And I think so when we come to the later item on the district-wide survey, I think they'll probably be finding some things in there to feed in specifically to that task and finish group. Thank you for that one. Any other topics we want to look at in there? Anybody wants to pick up on anything else in there in that particular report? Nope. I've got no hands up that I can see. Oh yes, I have. Claire.
Sorry, you did mention about having engagement with. We had the LEP, and we've also had from Tony Hunter Settle. Are we going to include that also into the work programme?
Yeah, I'm going to pick that up when we come to the recommendations now.
All right, sorry.
Okay. Well, we do need to look at one other thing actually before we go on a recommendation. Looking at the forward plan on page 19. Is there anything coming up there that we wish to pick up at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meetings on that forward plan? We're probably looking at the 14th of July onwards meeting, of course.
That's correct, Chair.
Right, Kate, Sam and Claire. Let's go with Kate first.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just making sure that I'm not missing something really obvious. I think that it might be pertinent, and I appreciate that this work has not yet been done, but I think it might be pertinent to look at what the recovery plan and having some set times where we're placing that on our agenda to make sure that we are getting a good view of that. Obviously, what I'm referring to is post-COVID, return to the new normal, and how recovery is going across the coast as a whole, and of course across the district as well. So I think it might be a good idea, whilst I appreciate that at the moment very little has been able to be done on that, and it is not the right time, but I think it would be pertinent to put it in the agenda going forward, perhaps starting in the September.
Just while we're on that one, and I notice we've got Councillor Steve Hanscom here. Is there anything planned to come to Cabinet or Council on recovery plan as well, Councillor Steve Hanscom?
Right. Yes, I think I'm now here and unmuted. There will be something coming, certainly coming to Cabinet. Obviously, things are very fluid at the moment. I'll ask Anthony if he can enlighten you any further, but clearly we will be looking at Cabinet at the recovery plan once that is much clearer. But I'll ask Anthony to perhaps elaborate on that if he will.
Chair, happy to come in. So the recovery plan is something we are literally working on at the moment. We are currently having recovery team meetings, which are senior officers of the organisation, at least once a week, often more frequently than that. So it's underway. It's not yet in a format that is ready to be presented to a committee. We will perhaps liaise with the leader and then yourself outside of this committee as to appropriate timing for that work. You'll appreciate, as I think it was Councillor Aspinwall said, it is a very fluid situation, and we are having to prioritise which elements of the recovery to look at first, depending on particular priorities and particular government announcements. But we are working on a more rounded recovery plan that includes community as well as the council returning to the new normal, whatever that might look like.
Okay, so Kate, are you happy if we leave that one as soon as there's a report available that it comes to overview and scrutiny?
I am happy with that. I would just like to say that I think it is worthwhile within that recovery plan, just considering whether there is an easier way to produce reports. So I note that you said there, Anthony, and it is noted that the work that you're doing thus far is not yet in a reportable format. And I just wonder whether this crisis has given us the opportunity to look at the formalities of that, and whether or not that can be done in an easier, more straightforward way that makes life easier for the officers, and also means that we can be a little bit more agile. So I just want to throw that in the mix of things to consider. But yes, I'm absolutely satisfied that we put that on our forward agenda when the time is appropriate, and that Anthony, you'll advise us when the appropriate time is.
Thank you for that. So Hilary, if we can make sure we get that included at the right time, that'd be great.
Chair, if I could just say, it could be in the format of a presentation rather than a formal report, so partly in the hands of the committees as to what they want to see. So we couldn't take that point outside of this meeting.
Yeah, that sounds a good idea, Anthony. Yeah, it certainly does. Claire.
Yes, the comments about the recovery plan, I think what I'm interested to know is, in the sort of the new world, any impact there is going to be on the way we are delivering services. So for example, at the moment, in the old days, people could just walk in and come to the customer services group in the reception area. So it's knowing what the impact of in the sort of the new world, but also what the impact of the COVID-19 is going to be, and of the way services have been done, is how it's impacted the council's budget. I don't know whether that is something that, as a scrutiny group, we are allowed to look at it, or whether that's something that the FAR group looks at. But obviously there's going to be an impact to our budget, and I just wanted to know who's overseeing and looking at that.
I think as far as the budget is concerned, FAR did discuss that last night in some of the early stages of the COVID-19 impact on the budget and on the medium-term financial reports. And I believe that's going back to FAR. I think that was asked for us to go back to FAR as soon as possible for their financial aspects. And I'm getting a thumbs up from Kate, who chaired that meeting. So that financial aspect is covered, Claire. On the wider thing about I think one good point from what you just said there is about the way the council works in the future. I think one of the things a lot of us have found that actually running meetings this way is actually quite a good way of doing things. There's quite a lot of engagement. I know we've had quite a lot of people viewing it on YouTube as well, which we don't normally get. We've had the last 3 meetings have had 100% turnout. Council with 100% turnout, first time in 14 years, quite a lot of engagement from people. I think we do need to look at the new ways of working. We've been rather pushed into this, my circumstances, but I think it's actually woken people up and woken us all up to that. We don't need to work as we always do. We have got new ways, and I think that's something we might need to consider as a presentation or report in that sense to overview and scrutiny later in the year. Probably September may be a bit early, but certainly December. Any thoughts on that? I can see I get a thumbs up from Judy on that one, but I think that might be quite a good way of going. Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I indicated to speak. The Corporate Peer Challenge action plan that you're looking at later on the agenda does reference a transformation programme. That was already in train in terms of in our thinking, but that is just reinforced by our collective experiences during the response to the pandemic. So absolutely, we will be looking at how we work, how we deliver services, how people engage with us, recognising that there are a great deal of opportunities at the moment presented by how we have had to respond to the pandemic. The point specifically around committee meetings will very much depend on what the government does in terms of legislation. You'll all be aware that until sort of March, April time, by law, all committee meetings had to be, and all votes had to be taken in person. The government had to change the legislation to allow these committee meetings to take place virtually. So we are going to be in their hands as to whether we can continue in this format in the longer term. It will depend on whether they change the law back. But I'm sure there will be lobbying through the LGA and others to enable us to keep a degree of flexibility, recognising that we could be in degrees of lockdown for quite some time yet. So even if some people might be able to be in a building socially distanced, others may need to be joining from home still. So a great deal of opportunities. The committee meeting specifically will depend on what the law says, but absolutely, it's all part of what we're considering at the moment.
Thank you, Anthony. I've been discussing this with others in LGA Leaders Group, and we had a meeting of the Police and Crime Commissioner that was held the other night very, very successfully, and some of the other leaders in that, but we're all saying this is a really good way, even if it is hybrids or I can't remember what the other word is, but sort of joint meetings. I like to call them hybrid meetings. Might be a way forward. Am I right in thinking, Anthony, that when this legislation came in, there was actually no stop date to it? It was just left as an open-ended?
Yes, that's correct. It is currently open-ended.
Right, thank you very much.
It's not open-ended. It finishes on the 7th of May next year. Sorry to interject.
Yeah, thank you for correcting me.
Sam.
Thanks, Chair. Just to sort of follow on from that little conversation there, regardless of what the legislation says, and I do think we need to be lobbying Parliament on that as a whole council, I think it's imperative, I think it's superb for the public to be able to see these council meetings going on via YouTube. And I think whatever happens, we need to keep that going forwards. The chamber at the District Council office behind you, David, is equipped with a live camera, which we can use. So I think we should absolutely be live streaming every single meeting. It's great for the public.
Yeah, the three leaders, Martin has actually passed some information on that is being looked at the moment, and ways of doing that and carrying on that with decent cameras and stuff in there to do that. In fact, they've even got costings on it. So that work is in progress. You'll be pleased to know, Sam, to carry on with that work. Right, thank you for that, everybody. I've got no more hands up on that one. So we have 4 recommendations with some extra bits added into those recommendations. 2.1 is that the committee prioritises proposed topics for inclusion in the work programme attached as Appendix A, and where appropriate, determine the high level form and timing of scrutiny input. And I think we've covered that with the extra bits we want in there. So Hillary's got a note of those, so we can add those in. Yep. The committee, having considered the forward plan attached as Appendix B, suggests a list of items be considered. It's a meeting of 16th July onward. We've done that, and we've also said we'd like to bring in the LEP and settle as per the advice of the peer review groups to future meetings for presentation from them. And 2.3, that the committee, in light of COVID-19 pandemic, consider the time and method of undertaking the proposed task and finish group reviews regarding the waste contract. We've already agreed that we'll drop the second one, the community engagement one, carry on with the one, and we'll look at, we'll talk amongst the various leaders as to getting nominations together for that and work a decent date out where everybody can take part who wants to take part. So I don't think it's going to be in the immediate future, but we certainly won't be putting it off now. And 2.4, that the committee requests the committee member and scrutiny officer to prepare a proposed protocol on task and finish reviews, taking into account research and a peer challenge report presented to the committee as soon as practicable. All those in favour of those recommendations? Hillary, do you want to do this because you know you can take the votes?
No, that's fine. I think all the hands have been cleared. So if you want to vote green for yes, red for no, and blue for abstain. Thank you. Okay, I can see already that that's carried. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Hillary. Moving on to agenda item 9. The district-wide survey 2019 key findings. Sarah, you're presenting this one, aren't you?
I think Martin's presenting it to start with. I think Martin's doing the...
Yeah, one of the recommendations of the peer review was that when it comes to scrutiny, that the report should be presented by the relevant executive member. So as I'm the relevant executive member on this one, I should be presenting, Chair. So thank you very much. The district-wide survey, as you know, is carried out every 2 years by telephone by Opinion Research Services. 1,000 residents are surveyed with quota controls to ensure a representative sample. And as some of us know, it's a lot easier to get some of the parts of the demographic than others. It of course does cover 2 different years. The first year, as we've already commented on, under the previous administration, where the difficulties of the waste services did cause some difficulties with our reputation. And then the second year under our new administration, where we've been rebuilding trust in the council. And you will see from the figures how far we've come in that regard. So if I can just draw out some highlights, Chair. If you look at paragraph 8.1.2, the overall satisfaction with the way the council runs things has decreased from 76% in 2017 to 73% in 2019. However, of course, satisfaction is still well above the Local Government Association national benchmark, where satisfaction was 63% in the relevant year. Moving on to paragraph 8.1.5, 56% of residents agree that the council provides value for money, while 19% disagree. Overall agreement that the council provides value for money is higher than, again, the national LGA figure of 48%. Now, turning to paragraph 8.1.7, there are several things that show a significant increase in agreement about the following statements. First, that the council involves, consults and engages with the community, 48% compared to 46% in 2017. Then that NHDC makes an effort to find out what people want, 42% compared to 35% in 2017. Then NHDC is working to make the area cleaner and greener, 61% compared to 55% in 2017. And finally, NHDC is efficient and well run, 50% compared to 41% in 2017. Now, when we go on to para 8.2.1, as I've already mentioned, we have some of the less advantageous results. Over 2/3 of residents are satisfied with waste and recycling, dropping from 79% in 2017, while around 1/4, 24%, are dissatisfied. We're moving back up, I think, but there was some way to go at that time. Remember, this was last year. Paragraph 8.3.2, moving on, 70% of residents have seen or had a copy of Outlook magazine in the last 12 months. This is decreased by a marginal amount of 2% since 2017. 83% like the way it looks and is presented. 77% like the way it's written. 67% find Outlook interesting. Moving on to look at the website, 71% in 0.4.4, sorry. 71% of residents said they visited the council's website within the last year. When asked about the website, 87% of residents think the information is useful to them. 78% think the information is clear and easy to understand, while 71% think the website is simple and easy to use. 63% think that the website looks and feels well designed. So that's, Chair, some of the highlights. I'd like to thank Sarah and her team for all the work and analysis that's gone into the survey. And as you indicated, she is also here to help me to answer questions. So thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Anything to add to that? Sarah?
No, not at this stage, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, thank you. So we're open to questions on this one. There's a couple of pieces I want to pick up on in particular in the report. And actually, one of them is on 8.1.7 and involves and engages with the local community. Yes, that's gone up a little bit, which is great. We're still a long way from where we were at our peak at 56% though, which we've got a long way to make up yet. And I think what we resolved earlier with making the engagement task and finish group a much wider remit is actually a good thing to do on that one. So I think that's going to work really well in with that recommendation. Picking up on the website bit, those who've been on these committees for quite a while, have been on the council for quite a while. On 8.4.2, how do you contact the council? From 2 surveys ago, those numbers have actually completely reversed, because the original one was how did people get their information and things. When you look at that bit of it, and it was a lot of people used to get their information about the council from the Comet as their primary one. Now it's from the website. But when you look at the way people contact it, it used to be by phone, which is still very high. Council website is coming up, but it's still quite low for contact. The information is useful, so 33% say the information is useful. But where we do seem to fall down is when we start looking at figure 33. It's a primary means of contact, primary means of getting information. But 60% of people are saying navigation around the website is difficult, cannot find the relevant information. 39%, finding relevant pages difficult. So our primary means of people getting information from the council, appear from that report to be telling us isn't the easiest thing in the world to navigate, you know. And as an example, if you wanted to see tonight's meeting and look at the reports on the meeting, you have to go through 7 separate steps before you get there to find it. That's if you know where to look in the first place, because the bit about council democracies right down the bottom of the page. Sarah.
Thank you. Just to make some points on the website, if I may. Specifically figure 33, whilst I do accept that those figures look quite high, that particular table is only a sample of the people who disagreed with the positive statements about the website. So it's only a small sample. It's not actually all residents answering that. Specifically, they're on navigation. Just also to say that actually the vast majority of people who go to our website actually get there through Google. So they're actually landing on the page. They're not having to navigate around the website. However, I do accept your point, David, about ModGov and being able to get to the committee meetings. That in part is because we haven't as yet integrated the ModGov search with our own web search. Primarily because if we did that, it would throw up an awful lot of data on our own search. So our website manager is actually looking at a way of having more committee pages on our own website that would mean that people didn't have to go through 7 links to get to ModGov. So we are actively looking at that. I don't know if you want me to tell you what we've got planned for the website.
Yeah,
for this.
It could be useful, yeah.
Okay, so the website is actually built using Drupal. We're on Drupal 7, and unfortunately for us, Drupal 7 is reaching the end of its life next year in November 2021. So we have to upgrade our website to Drupal 9. We have been advised that actually this is a major upgrade and basically means that we will have to rebuild our website. So it is on the communications service action plan for this year to look at the implications of moving to Drupal 9, but also at the same time, it will clearly be most cost effective time to look at, do we need to do some work on design? Do we have a refresh of the navigation? I'm also looking at whether we can utilise our citizens panel to do some user testing. So the website is very much on our radar for this year.
Is there any, with that big major changes coming in, is there any reason why we wouldn't look at hosting it on a different platform, building it on a different platform?
I wouldn't rule it out, but it's partly will come down to cost as much as anything. And we may have quite a cost-effective way of moving over to Drupal 9, which is the people who are going to host our website they host quite a few council websites, and they're hoping to essentially have like a template website for local authorities that we can move over at a more cost-effective way. But we'll be considering all options. We certainly wouldn't be restricting ourselves to Drupal, for no reason.
But part of the reason was asking, I know there's a number of other councils use different bases, and in fact some of our neighbouring authorities use different bases for their websites. To be honest, I find some of them, particularly Central Beds, is a very easy website to navigate, and what that's built on, it's a really easy site to navigate. Some of other neighbours are. So I wonder if it'd be worth just, I assume we talk to other local authorities and see where they're having issues and things.
Yeah, I think that will all come as part of the sort of scoping process, to be honest, see what other people are doing and what works best, really.
Thank you. Claire and then Val.
Thank you, David. Yeah, you actually highlighted some of the things on the figure 33 about the council's website, and we've obviously heard a lot of information there about the fact that it's going to have some renewal in that. One thing I did wonder is, not that I've seen it, that when you've used the website, and a lot of websites around the world, they ask, would you like to do a short survey? And I wondered whether or not we'd ever thought about having a short survey put into those that are using the website, just so that they can give us that feedback to help us understand what it is that we could do better in the future. I must admit, I've tried using the search facility within the council's website when I'm looking for things, and it's not that bad, although it does seem to throw up lots and lots of pages. So you've got to kind of know what you're looking for to find the relevant information. But that was just one thought I just wondered had been considered. And I have a second point. I don't know whether I can do that now or whether or not anybody wants to. Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead with it now.
Right. Well, one was a comment, actually. It was on 8.3.9, which is about the leisure services. And given as a council that we've done quite a lot of investment in our leisure services over the last few years, I was a little, well, not quite the word, as I was just disappointed, I suppose, that we haven't maintained such a good rating, because we have done a lot of improvements in both the Letchworth and the Hitching swim centres. So I was kind of surprised that kind of hasn't been picked up and reflected. But that's just a comment. Again, if anybody wants to comment back at me, please do. And the other thing is on the information and communication. It's, residents were asked where they normally get their information. Going forward in the future, should be asking whether or not they're getting them through Twitter. And also, I know when you're on the council's website, it always asks you, would you like to sign up for news and newsletters and things? And again, is what has been the uptake of that of residents across the district? And again, going forward in the surveys, should we not be also asking, including whether or not our survey, the residents are using that as a way to get communications from us? It's just, it doesn't seem to be reflected in the survey at the moment. And I thought perhaps going forward it should be.
Okay, thank you. Val, if you want to bring your bits and we'll deal with all the answers in one go. Val, you there? Seems to have frozen.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you now, Val. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, could I ask Sarah to clarify? Are we on Drupal 8 at the moment?
No, we're not. We're on Drupal 7. But the reason we're moving, basically Drupal, we could move to Drupal 8, but there's almost no point in moving to Drupal 8. We need to move. Drupal 8 in itself is a massive upgrade, so we just move straight to Drupal 9.
That's,
massive upgrade.
Can I just come back on that? So the reason why I'm asking is not to do with the intricacies of Drupal, but the fact I think as a council, we've got to keep up to date. And that wherever we choose, we've got to make sure that we're on the latest version and not to be behind. Because I think that Sarah knows difficulties will be from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9. So Drupal 9 or something similar, and let's think a little bit more positively about the future.
Thanks. Do you want to come back on that, Sarah?
I don't really have anything to add about Drupal 7 versus Drupal 9. Did you want me? I mean, yeah. Except to say that at the minute, Drupal 7 is not affecting, being on Drupal 7 is not affecting the performance of the website. It's a stable platform to be on. But it's obviously, yes, we need to upgrade. I think the point about Drupal 8 versus Drupal 9 is moving to Drupal 8 is a massive upgrade. Moving to Drupal 9 from Drupal 8 is only a very minor upgrade. It's almost, so I think, you know, I don't think we're massively behind, but we are obviously, we know we need to move.
Yeah, if you're gonna do it once and do it properly. I think is the answer to that one, isn't it? Just picking up on Claire's point. Well, second one of her points I'll pick up on first is where we get our pop-up at the beginning. Do you want to sign up for alerts and everything? Do we have any figures on how many people do that? And also, you got the text alerts for the bins and that. Is that the same thing? And do we get a good sign up for that?
So text alerts is actually not very high. We've, to be honest, I can't remember the figures for text alerts off the top of my head, but it's not particularly high. However, the e-bulletins we have had quite good success with. We've got probably about 12,000 subscribers now, and obviously within that, people subscribe to different topics. Just to say also about Claire's point about Twitter and sources of information, that is included in the list of information sources. I think I've just picked out the top ones that people say, but that one and the e-bulletin, they are actually included as potential sources of information in the main report. It's just, they just don't come as highly as the other ones currently.
Okay, could somebody pick up on a bit about the leisure ones? Claire said that, you know, we've invested a huge amount of money in the leisure facilities, and we've got some fantastic leisure facilities, but the satisfaction rating isn't brilliant with them. Is anybody?
Well, can I come in on that one? I think if you read 8.2.9, you can see that although there's been a slight drop in terms of the council's leisure facilities, it's from a very high figure, and indeed the paragraph does show that our own data does show that satisfaction is still very high. I think one of the things, I can't remember whether it's here or somewhere else, that people's appreciation of leisure facilities tends to depend on how good a summer it's been, and if there's less use of some of the facilities, maybe that has an effect on how people look at them. But you know, it's mentioned in that paragraph that North Outs Leisure Centre has also won NBS Award for overall high score in customer satisfaction. So I think, and I take Claire's point, it's disappointing, a slight reduction, but I don't think it's a really significant one. Of course, one of the other things, when you go to play areas, actually closing one or two play areas doesn't actually go down very well with the public, which of course is something that the previous administration decided to do.
Okay, I think the other point on there as well is that there is a lot more choice available now than there used to be. There's quite a lot of private leisure centres and gyms and that been popping up in the last couple of years. Certainly got two now appeared in Letchworth very recently, which do offer some very high class facilities, mind you, at a much higher price than we charge. So I think there's still good value and money for that. I don't have any more hands up on this report. I can't. Yes, I do. Sam and Sue. Sam first.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back to what Sarah Kingsley was saying about the interactions, how people contact the council, and the fact that social media is lower than some of those other forms, including written letters. I'm struggling to believe that figure. I mean, I see the NHDC Twitter account gets quite a lot of interactions. People are, interacting with that account and on Facebook as well. Is that really correct that more people write, old-fashioned paper letters to the council than interact on electronic media, social media?
I would say that particular figure about the via letter. I suppose it depends what you class as contacting the council, because they're not talking about where they get their information from. They're talking about how they contact the council. And I guess the vast majority of people on our social media channels are not necessarily contacting us. Even if they're making comments, they're engaging with us. But I think that's probably where people may not get that distinction, perhaps.
We've talked about this before, haven't we, in previous years on this committee, the differentiation between what's a complaint, what's a comment, and what counts as a contact to the council and what counts as a comment. There's weird sort of definitions going on here that I've never quite sat correctly, I think, because a lot of people will ask what's going on with the bins, and they'll get a very quick response from the NHDC Twitter account, which is fantastically run and really responsive. But I don't think those are being counted in this at all here. I genuinely don't think more people write paper letters to contact the council than will make a comment on the social media accounts. I really don't believe that figure.
I would just say but these aren't the figures that we've come up with. These are the figures that the public are telling us. So I just think it's probably the way the question is worded about when you have you contacted the council in the last 12 months and how did you contact them? I just think a lot of those people who said, yes, I've contacted them, are probably thinking about more traditional channels of communication. Whereas if they said, have you had any I don't know, even like engagement with the council, then perhaps if we said social media, then maybe that would come up higher. But I agree, the figures in terms of our engagement on Facebook and Twitter is really high. I believe the customer services manager is bringing a 3Cs report to the next Overview and Scrutiny committee, and I've got some social media data on our engagement to add to that one as well.
That's right, Sam. We have got 3Cs coming to the next meeting, so I'm sure we can pick up on the definitions of what's a complaint and what's a comment again. I'm pretty sure we will be picking up on that one next time round. Sue.
Sorry. Yes, Councillor Sue Nguala. I just was thinking about how to get really good answers and information from the public. And so qualitative surveys where you're required to tick boxes and say yes or no or don't know, don't really give you enough information. And I noticed that, Sarah, you were saying that you'd picked out a few of the dissatisfied responders and brought them in to talk to them about, or did you re-survey them to get more feedback from them about why they were dissatisfied?
No, that was just a specific question on the website. So we asked when people were given agreement ratings to say their agreement with, I don't know, is the website is well designed, for example. And if those people had said they disagreed with that statement, those people will then subsequently ask follow-on questions about what it is about the website they didn't like. I totally agree with you. It's difficult with a survey like this to get more in-depth responses. It's more supposed to be I suppose a snapshot and a benchmark really of public perception, and then the idea being that we will then look at in more detail, perhaps by using the citizens panel, or perhaps by doing focus groups for if there's any problem areas that we want to explore further.
Yeah, so people could give you a verbal account of why they're dissatisfied, and you could make more sense of it. So particularly with the leisure centres, we're just saying we don't know why people are dissatisfied, but surely we could bring in some of those people that were dissatisfied and ask them, what did you mean? What particularly are you talking about? Are you talking about play areas or the swimming pool, or what exactly do you mean? So
yeah, I'm sure this. Yeah, I'm sure the service director place might have a view on that, but I also know that SLL capture their own customer data on complaints and comments, so they've probably got quite a lot of that information already. I would have, specifically on leisure. But yes, I think if there's specific areas we want to look at, we can definitely do it in more detail with a smaller group. Just to say as well, we're actually looking at the consultation strategy later this year. So the consultation strategy runs to 2020, to the end of 2020. So we will be reviewing that. So again, that's an opportunity to look at how we do things currently and whether there's things we could do better.
I think also it's something now that we've said we'll establish this community engagement task and finish group. I think it's something we could cover in that, as well as the ways we engage, and whether what we do at the moment is appropriate to the way we are now. It's been going for some time now. I think Claire was probably involved with the start of the district-wide survey in her time. Claire?
Yes, I think I was chairing. It was either Eric or Park when we introduced it. So it's probably been running 17, 18 years now.
So yeah, perhaps it is time.
A long time. But I mean, it's not, as you say, it's not run every year.
Yeah, so every other year, isn't it? Okay, thank you for that, everybody. So you still got a hand up? You finished? Thank you. Can't see any more hands up. Just scroll down the page, just make sure. No, we're clear on that one. Okay, there's no specific recommendations for this one. This is a report to Cabinet, and it comes to overview and scrutiny for our comments. And as Martin's here and several other Cabinet members there, I'm sure you'll be taking notes of our comments on the various items in there when you discuss.
Indeed.
Thank you, Martin. Moving on then. Corporate Peer, item 10, Corporate Peer Challenge Action Plan. Whose portfolio presenting on this, or Martin presenting on this?
It's me again, with obviously the deputy leader as well, Paul Clark, will also maybe chipping in on some of this, Chair.
Thank you.
Clearly, this is an important report for Cabinet. We'll be looking at next week. The Corporate Peer Challenge set the Council a number of challenges. It said some positive things about us, that we have partners who hold us in high esteem, who want to work with us, and you want to look at a couple of those, of course. And they also note our intention to be more welcoming and inclusive. But there are challenges to face if we want to reach our potential. To be risk aware rather than risk averse, to better understand our customer experience. And I would say it's appropriate that this report follows our previous report on the district-wide survey, and that shows something of what our customers think, and perhaps forms a baseline from which we can go forward. And in 8.3 in the report, we talk about the need to reimagine the customer experience. Of course, as has already been mentioned, we are entering a very different world post-COVID-19, which makes it even more important that we are flexible enough and brave enough to change. A world where interactions with everything from your bank and your shop can be achieved on your phone, and indeed through Zoom meetings like this, but where the needs of the vulnerable have grown in ways we haven't yet fathomed. As recommendation 2 indicates, this is not something where we know exactly what we want to do immediately. This is work in progress. We have an opportunity to put the climate emergency at the centre of the way our community recovers from this period and take the lead in that. And section 8.4 in the report talks of using the theme of sustainability as we unpack what the peer challenge group talked about and what it means to have an ambitious place narrative. I've already mentioned our intention to be inclusive. As we respond to the Black Lives Matter movement, we intend to use the opportunity to listen to our Black staff members and Black customers in particular and respond to their insights and concerns to turn that intention into reality. Now, the appendix outlines the peer challenge recommendations and the actions we propose, from the key top-level ones to the more detailed. And indeed, I do welcome this opportunity for this committee to comment and inform the way we take the action plan forward. But as I said, this is work in progress, and we will continue to be open to further engagement with all councillors as the action plan is implemented and the transformation programme takes shape. I should thank Anthony and David, together with the leadership team, cabinet colleagues, and indeed many others for all their work on what has been very much a collaborative effort. As you know, Anthony is here to take questions as well as myself and Paul, and also to take part in the discussion. So with that, I commend the report to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Paul, do you want to come in on this one? Paul Clark?
No, I'm happy with what David said, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy with what Martin said, thank you, David.
Right.
Get the names right.
Get the names right, yeah. Anthony.
Thank you, Chair. Just to flag, what you have before you was the penultimate version of the Cabinet report. There was one change to the report that's going to Cabinet next week, which if I just tell the committee, there is a 4th recommendation in the Cabinet papers, excuse me, which links to the transformation programme. Excuse me. It reads, so it's 2.4, that agreeing the specification for and intended outcomes of the transformation programme be delegated to the leader, deputy leader, executive member for finance and IT, managing director and service director resources. So that sits alongside recommendation 2.3 to build a bit of control around how that budget is going to be utilised. So Cabinet will have that 4th recommendation, but that was added after your papers were published.
Thank you, Anthony. Sam?
Yeah, just to sort of pick up slightly on something Martin just said. Obviously, he referenced quite rightly the Black Lives Matter campaign, though I'd just like to clarify that he meant all minority groups in that statement, as well as just the Black minority group.
Indeed, I was taking that as an example. I think I'm very conscious that there are people who tend to say all lives matter. Well, that's not the point. The Black community is feeling very anxious at the moment, very angry about some really awful things that have happened in the States. And it's also drawn attention to the fact there's a long way to go, though we have come, and it's been, and actually you probably can't see it, but there's a picture of Martin Luther King and the Washington speech behind me. That's been part of my DNA all the time I've been in politics, to improve things for all minorities. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to say that, but that's it's an opportunity now to respond to that and make it clear that we're not just words, that and we say it right across party. And as you know, all the party leaders in Hertfordshire have put their names to a statement making it clear what our intentions are to respond to that in a very positive way. So thank you, Sam, for allowing me to clarify that.
Thank you, Martin. Sue, I think you got your hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Sue Nguala. I just wanted to hear again how you're going to consult people on taking Black Lives Matter forward. So you said you were going to consult members of the community, or service users, did you say, and Black members of staff?
I was very interested to know that the County Council have consulted their staff, their black staff, to see what they can do to take that forward. And it seemed to me that that's something we would like to do, and it's something we've talked about I've talked about with Anthony and David and Paul in terms of looking at our staff. But of course, we're talking also about the customer experience. So as we look at our customer experience, we will make a point of ensuring that that Black and minority ethnic members of the community and other disadvantaged groups, I mean, we can go wider than that, but certainly I'm very determined to make sure that that's part of what we do.
So, thank you, Martin. Got no other hands up at the moment. I just was going to make a comment on page 44 of the report on the appendix. There's a point highlighted in there, and I think that's a very pertinent. The one that's highlighted in there is key 8: be brave. Officers and members should be prepared to question each other with failing to be brave in our aspirations. I think that's quite a good rallying cry to have, actually. And I think one thing we've learned from this COVID-19 situation is things don't have to take forever to be done. Things can be done quickly, things can be done properly, and people can work together a lot more and a lot more cooperatively. And there's a lot of give and take being around. There's a lot happened in the last 3 months. There's been some big changes. Those changes are going to carry on happening. And I think we are, you keep hearing this phrase, when we are back to normal. Personally, I don't think we're ever going to go back to the same situation. Things have changed. We've all learned how to change. I think Martin mentioned there, even stuff like retail. Anybody who's involved in retail the last 2 days, we've seen what's happening in the shops and working in the shops and what the people in retail have had to do to do that. And it's happened and it's worked and people are cooperating. So I think there's an awful lot to be said for actually, just get on with it. Make a decision, just do it. Claire.
Yes, I just wanted to raise on page 52 about the planning committee. Always had a thing about planning, but I note in action 38, and it talks about planning training for the planning committee. I would like to see planning training for every member of the council, and particularly new members, because they might not sit on the planning committee for a few years, unless they just happen, that's where they want, that's the committee they want to go, and their leaders put them on. But all of us, from probably day one of a councillor, experience planning, because it often forms quite a bit of our correspondence that we get with residents. And I really do think that if new members could actually, and all existing members, because a refresher is never a bad thing because planning guidance is changing all the time, should have to go through that training. And it might also, I know we've had some constitutional changes that have been made in how call-in can be operated, but it actually might help all members then remember about what is a legitimate reason in terms of planning by having that training as to whether or not it is a planning reason for calling in or not. So I would just like to ask that particular item could be mandatory for all members.
Chair, can I just bring to your attention that we, in the induction, we do invite all members to planning, training, and new. It's part of the induction programme after each election.
I know you invite them, but I would like it to see it as being mandatory.
Can I say to Claire that you're pushing at an open door there? But I think the problem is that, as we all know, all group leaders know, actually providing compulsory training is one thing, getting everyone to attend is another thing, and there are 1 or 2 bits of compulsory training that 1 or 2 members need to take, as I was reminded a few days ago. So I absolutely agree with you, Claire. Let's let's really redouble our efforts to make sure that people do take the training there. But I think it's an absolutely fine thing to go into the action plan, to put that in, that should be for everyone. I totally agree.
But again, for if you haven't attended the training, I don't think you should be allowed to call in an application until you've attended the training.
I think Paul's got something on this one. Paul?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I was just going to say, like Martin, you're pushing an open door with me with my planning and transport portfolio hat on. Obviously, councillors are elected to represent their residents. I understand what you mean about having the training, and that's why it should be open to all, because it's not just serving on the planning committee, it's also when you're calling things in, you need to understand what you're calling things in for and how to object properly. As Tony would say, you know, the MPPF is a wonderful document, but you've got to understand it. But that's why we also want to take the training wider, not just our own officers saying this is how we do it, but using the planning advisory service and understanding planning at a better depth with all councillors invited. But we are conscious that councillors do live busy lives with meetings and other issues. So I'm not sure about mandatory. Definitely for the planning committee and the subs, that has to be. And now we've got allowed more subs, there might be, you know, build out training that way.
Thank you, Paul. I just commenting on that one as the former portfolio holders on that one. We always invited all councillors to all training sessions. Any training session we had on planning was always open to all members. They were all invited. The uptake, unfortunately, wasn't high. But I do take the point about, particularly about people calling in. You really do need to know why you're calling it in. I think the subtle tweaks we made to the wording in the Constitution will help with that, in having to have the valid reasons and everything. So people will have to find, you know, if they don't know it, they're going to have to look it up. But I think it is one of those things that I'm not sure whether I don't know if Jeanette can advise us, is it something we could make compulsory given time, or do we need to make it compulsory? Could we make it compulsory?
Yeah, that's certainly within your powers. Group leaders can agree that something is. You could recommend Cabinet that that's going to be the case. They can endorse it in any event.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm actually coming to thinking that it may not be a bad idea to have all members to undertake some form of basic planning training once we become a member, particularly if they're going to comment on it. It is getting very important now that we do it. So I think what I'm going to do, and if I have anybody to second it, is to add a recommendation in there to Cabinet that Cabinet considers making basic planning training compulsory to all members once they're elected. Do I have anybody who wants to second that one? Sam?
Yes, seconded.
I've got quite a lot of hands showing there as well, so I think
seconded. Yeah,
we'll add that into when we do the recommendations to council. Thank you very much for that one. Any more comments on this report? No. So I think what we will do is we'll say we endorse this report going forward to Cabinet with the recommendation of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee that planning training be made compulsory for all members, elected members of the council. If we could take a vote on that, please. Are you ready for this one, Hilary?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so all those in favour, you indicate in the usual way.
Thank you. I can see already that that's carried. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Agenda item 11, fourth quarter performance indicators report. this is a report of the service director, but is there a portfolio holder willing to take it or wants to take it?
I think I'm going to be presenting that one, Chair.
Okay, if you carry on then, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So item 11, this is the last quarter performance indicator data for the 1920 year, and this is the full report. So again, in line with the recommended action plan from the peer review, that all of the indicators come through. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, before we move on, could you, because you're only on the telephone, for the people who are watching on YouTube and that, could you just introduce yourself and your title, please?
Yes, certainly. My name is Rachel Cooper, the Controls Risk and Performance Manager.
Thank you, Rachel. If you can carry on, please. Thank you.
So page 59 shows the status summary for the 19 performance indicators that we've been reporting all year. And just to let you know, there was a supplementary report added to the agenda pack. So the main agenda pack doesn't show the stats for the percentage of environmental health inspections completed. So the actual number of green indicators is 8. There are 4 amber indicators and 7 indicators which are just for information only with no target set. Direction of travel arrows. The vertical arrow shows a positive direction of travel on an indicator and the other arrow shows a negative direction of travel. So going down to page 60, we can see the percentage of invoices paid on time and also the collection rates for sales, invoices, council tax and an NDR are all meeting their targets for the year. BV12 on the same page. This is the sickness absence indicator. This is the combined short-term and long-term indicator. And you can see, although it's for information only, this is where we do the benchmarking with LG Inform. And you can see that we had the 3rd lowest sickness rates out of the 47 districts who compiled data in this area. Page 61 is the breakdown of the short-term and long-term absence. So the short-term absence is the only indicator where we have a target, and you can see we're slightly under target for the year with the amber indicator. And just to mention that there were no reported COVID-19 sickness data within those figures. Page 64, line 11, this is where the percentage of environmental health programmed inspections completed. The data is actually 100% as at year end, and that's contained in the supplementary pack. The page 65, we've got an amber indicator on number of visits to the leisure facilities. So the outdoor pool figures, there was a drop mainly due to the poor weather experienced over the summer season. And the other facilities, the drop is directly linked to the effect of the COVID-19 restrictions that were in place. NI 191 and NI 192, the kilos of household waste collected and household waste sent for recycling. Again, both green indicators, so meeting their targets for year end. Then we move to page 66, where we have the food waste. Again, this is an amber indicator. However, the primary aim is to continue to actually reduce production of food waste. So the campaigns in 2021 will see those figures reducing rather than going up. And then finally, page 67, the overall tonnage of garden waste collected again is an amber indicator. This one is difficult to predict. However, again, in 2021, we expect to see those figures going down again, due partly to the 6-week suspension due to COVID-19. So that's the final thing I was going to say on that report.
Thank you for that. I do think it's important that remember this is the last quarter of 1920, so the actual impact from COVID was very, although we had some of it towards the end of the quarter, there wasn't a huge amount. So I think it's important to remember that when we're asking any questions on it. And I'm sure that when we come to the first quarter of 2021, in some of those areas that we've covered, particularly around payments and debts and things, I'm pretty sure we may see a significant change, unfortunately, on that one. Okay, open for comments from anybody. Don't see any hands up at the moment. Scroll down my list. No, no comments on that one. So if everybody's happy with that one, it's a report to note again. Don't have to make any recommendations on it. So happy to move on with that one. Agenda item 12 is fourth quarter monitoring reports on key projects. Rachel again.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. So this is Rachel Cooper, Controls Risk and Performance Manager again. So the fourth quarter monitoring report, so again, the final monitoring report on projects within the corporate plan for 1920. So the executive summary says that the projects were first identified to the committee in March 2019. 8.3 and 8.4 of the report, just to note that due to the waste manager returning and the handover and then the COVID-19, there's no detailed update on the waste project provided at this meeting. However, Appendix B does show the missed bins data for each type of collection. 8.6, just to note, in the third quarter monitoring report, the North Herts Community Facility and Town Hall project was reported as complete, and the lessons learned and the project sign-off report, and it's therefore been removed from future monitoring reports. So moving on to Appendix A, which is page 75. So page 75 shows the status summary again of the projects. So there are 6 current ongoing projects that were identified in the corporate plan. And you can see we have 4 showing status of amber, 1 green and 1 as pending at the moment. So if we move to page 76, the development of the crematorium, we did have a hearing date set for the 13th of May. However, due to COVID-19, that hearing date was cancelled, and we're now currently waiting for the planning inspectorate to set a new date. Page 77, investigating a range of options to improve use of council assets. The Maine trading company has now been set up and registered with Companies House. However, the property company, which was one of the milestones, has not been set up yet, because all of the assets currently owned by the council are better being converted to non-residential. Therefore, it makes more business sense to keep these assets under the council and not the company. However, our officers will be keeping this under review. Page 78, submission of the local plan. Again, we had hearings set for March and April, which were cancelled due to the COVID-19. And we're waiting for the planning inspectorate to set the new hearing dates. At the moment, there's no suggestion that these might occur virtually, so we're thinking that perhaps it might be autumn before the hearings are resumed. Page 79, designating air quality management. Progress really is limited in this area given the lack of dedicated resource and the current situation. So following recruitment of a new staff member, the action plan may be amended with the support of the executive member. I think well, anything else? I think that was all I was going to say on that one. And then just Appendix B is the data just showing the number of missed bins by collection type for 1920. And this is actually going to be set up as a performance indicator for the 2021 year. So the stats can come through this committee for the next year.
Thank you for that. Just a couple of quick comments from me on that. The page 79, the local plan thing, there was some suggestion. It says in there about there's no, at the moment, there's nothing alternative approach. But there was a letter written, and there has been some work recently about having local plans as virtual or done by other means. Has anybody heard anything else on that one? No updates on that one?
No, nothing on that from me at the moment, I'm afraid.
I can just come in on that. We do know that there is a pilot in Oxfordshire of taking local plan forward. We are awaiting the outcome of that, but as you quite correctly say, Chair, a letter has gone in to see whether we can, we'll be able to follow that with making progress on our local plan. Obviously, as soon as we know, obviously, members, including yourself, will be informed.
Yeah, thank you, man. That was what I was hoping somebody would mention about. Thank you for that. That's great. The other one as well, just picking up on, is the anti-idling campaign and National Clean Air Day. We seem to have had an enforced 3-month National Clean Air, 3 months, and I'm assuming that we do collect all the data and everything regularly, and I think we monitor it regularly. It would be interesting to, at some point, possibly through the Cabinet Panel on Environment or something, to have a look at what the actual impact of the lockdown and everything has had on those pollution levels in our key points and throughout the district. It'd be an interesting exercise, and to see as we gradually come out of lockdown, what's actually happened. Just a suggestion for now. It's nothing I want to move a formal one on, but just something to bear in mind. Sam.
Yeah, just to respond to that, I do know that from the air quality monitoring stations, Three Moorhens, for example, and the other ones, that data is stored and is available. Anybody, if you find the right website, you can go and look it up, and that would be a really interesting exercise to do, to see what the impact would be, and it's very quick and easy to look at, actually. So we absolutely could do that, and I think you're right, that could be a good thing for the Environment Panel, and I shall suggest that to him, to Councillor Jarvis.
Jeanette.
Just to confirm that Ruben's in the process of instructing some consultants who are going to be preparing work on our carbon footprint, so that will be benchmarking and looking at that sort of data, and hopefully bring that back as part of our overall review of our strategy, our new strategy, obviously, that came in January.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's all, the other things, and I don't know if we could even look at it, is we've obviously had an awful lot less aeroplanes flying above us in the last few months, an awful lot. I just wonder if it's any coincidence that we've had such nice weather lately and clear, cloudless skies, but there we go. We'll find out in a month or so's time when things start to get back a few more airplanes in the sky, see what happens. There we go. Could be a good way of monitoring climate change. Thank you for that one. Okay, so I've gotten, I have. Sam, you still got your hand up. Do you want to come back?
I do want to come back. I was umming and ahhing about coming back. This is a question that I will happily wait till later in the meeting to get an answer on. Just in the data here, in one of the appendixes, we've got the number of missed bins collected, and there was a bit of a surge of missed bins in the middle part of last year, and I'm not quite sure of what we knew what the cause of that was. It did seem to pick up, and it's obviously back to normal in the most recent data, but through the sort of summer months, it did look like the rate of missed bins doubled for a few months and then went back down.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Got no more hands up on that one. So the recommendation from the committee is that the delivery against the key projects for 1920 be noted and commented by on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which we've done. Any other recommendations is, I think that's the informal one, and perhaps the Environment Panel looks at the data and that, and just sees how it's, as an interesting one, and I think that could be quite revealing. Okay, thank you everybody on that one. Rachel, if you can, if you wish now. Item 13, regulation of get my teeth in. Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, RIPA, update and annual review.
Yes,
are you taking this one, Martin?
I'm taking this one, and it's become very clear to me which areas I do seem to be responsible for. So I will, but I'm going to follow the script on this one, because there's a lot of acronyms I've got to get through. So I will tell you what I've got written here and introduce the item. The report covers the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, annual review, and the outcome and recommendations following the recent April inspection by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office. REPA, as member are no doubt aware, regulates how a public authority such as this council can undertake covert surveillance, use a covert human intelligence source, and potentially intercept communications. And the ability for our authority to do this, as I would definitely say, thankfully, limited. It requires court or Office of Communications Data Authorisations approval. It's possible for that reason that this authority, our officers have not used those powers for 9 years, possibly for that reason, sorry. And I don't think we'd want to either. Nevertheless, we are obliged to have a REPA policy and mechanisms in place to ensure we act lawfully. You will see from the inspection report at Appendix A and in 8.2 that the inspector believes we have effective systems in place. Some recommendations were made in respect of the policy, and these have been put into Appendix B, and that's summarised in 8.2 and 8.3. Some minor changes have also been recommended for the social media policy, as set out in Appendix C, I've lost my place, and summarised in 8.4. And as you, Jeanette Thompson, who is the relevant officer, for whom I thank for providing me with these bullet points and also for all the work involved, is here to also answer questions. Otherwise, I would commend the recommendations under 2.1 and 2.2 to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Jeanette, anything to pick up? Oh, Councillor Hamann.
A very minor point, if I may, please. Rest assured, this is not dissimilar to a report which is going to another place under a certain portfolio holder sitting in front of you. So I'm aware that this is not dissimilar to that. I noticed down at County Hall we have had added Tick-Tock to our list of social media sites that are being monitored. This is a new one. It's not on our list in 3.3 on page 124. So you might want to, I know there's plenty of others, but that's one that's getting quite a bit of airtime at the moment. So we might want to add it to 3.3 on page 124 at some time.
Okay.
Happy to do that.
Jeanette, anything else to add to this report?
No, happy to do that, but nothing else to add.
Okay, I've got no hands up at the moment on this particular one. No, nobody wants to come in on this one. So the recommendations on that we know the contents of this and the Investigatory Power Commission's Office Inspection Report, and recommends to Cabinet the approval of the RIPA policy and social media investigations policy as amended. I don't think there's any particular vote needed on that one unless anybody advises me otherwise. So we'll move on to the next item. Members' questions. I've had one already submitted and by a message, and that is, can we have a break, a comfort break? And the answer to that particular one is yes. We'll have a it's at the moment it's 9:16. If we can be back for 9:25, please. Get your cups of tea and coffee and everything, and we'll resume where we left off. Thank you.
Chair,
Yeah.
can you
That's
please
good.
mute your microphone?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Oh, wait. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, can you
Still
mute
hear
your
you
microphone,
and
please?
still see you.
Can you hear me? Hang on.
Yeah, I can still hear you and see you as well.
Okay, I'm back, Click. Hello?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I was just asking if you mute your microphone, please.
Muted, sorry.
Chair, do you want to call everyone to order, and I'll ask the IT manager to restart the meeting?
Yes, certainly, Hilary. Good evening, everybody. If we could get ready to resume the meeting, please. Thank you.
Over to you, Chair.
Okay, Hilary, if you could just do a quick roll call to make sure we're all back.
Certainly. Can you just answer when I call your names, please? Councillor Aspinwall.
Hi, here.
Bryant. Councillor Bryant. Okay, I'll come back to that. Councillor Collins.
Hello.
Councillor Hone.
Yeah.
Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Councillor Levitt.
Yeah.
Councillor McNally.
Yes.
Councillor Nash.
Here.
Councillor Nguala.
Present.
Councillor Rogeria Kakir.
Present.
Councillor Strong.
Present.
Councillor Tyson.
Present.
Councillor Tyson, sorry.
Present.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Thank you. That's everybody here. Thank you.
Present.
Thank you, Hilary. If we could move on then. We were on item 14, members' questions. We have none formally submitted. So we'll move on to item 15, garden waste collection service, impacts of COVID-19. Elizabeth, Councillor Elizabeth Dennis-Halbert.
Lovely, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for accommodating us this evening. So I'm assuming members have all read the report, and we've had regular communications about what's being done in respect of various reactions to the COVID-19 crisis. So I shall just briefly summarise some of the thinking behind the recommendation that's being put forward. When we're looking at garden waste, I think what's been foremost in my mind is, since this contract started in 2018, we've placed our residents in a position of almost turning them into consumers. So if you create a consumer, you create a consumer mindset, which means that if something goes wrong with that contract and you're not performing, you need to come up with some form of redress to put things right and to help them have trust and confidence in you as their service provider. So we've looked at a number of possible options to redress our customers for the 3 missed collections of garden waste that they experienced as a result of garden waste services being suspended. Now, when we're thinking about redress, it has to be both sufficient and adequate, otherwise it's not meaningful. As I've said, our residents missed 3 collections over a period of 6 weeks out of a total collection cycle of 26. So that's sort of the base figures that we're working with. And having sort of worked through and looked at balancing the administrative burdens on us as a local authority, as opposed to a commercial entity dealing with consumers, and the actual sort of loss and difficulty and inconvenience our residents suffered, we felt that actually an extension of the existing subscription period to mirror the loss of collections that people experienced was the most reasonable outcome. And it's also the most administratively workable outcome as well. So we're looking at potentially sustaining a loss if we extend the subscription period by 2 months to fully cover people of about £186,000 in this financial period. But if we were to take one of the other options forward that's set out in the report, the losses could continue over a greater period of time, or actually people wouldn't be adequately compensated or feel adequately compensated for the services that they've lost as well. The downside, obviously, of extending the subscription period for the second time in this contract's history, very unfortunately, is that the new year for the garden waste is now going to run from October, which is sort of a low gardening, low growth season. So there's a risk that we might see fewer people resubscribing in October initially as a result of them not gardening over the winter period. However, we then might see a spike and more people subscribing in the springtime. Some of those might be captured in the 2020-2021 financial year, but some of them might slip into the next financial year as well, which means that our revenue will be lower as a result of us taking this action. But I think I would rather sort of take an approach which is going to ensure that everybody who has lost out as a result of this unprecedented action having the opportunity to have that loss be redressed, then take an option that would miss out some of our residents or that could compensate people who weren't directly impacted by this issue. I am conscious that we're not out of the woods yet with this virus. There could well be a second spike in infection rates. We may see more staff self-isolating, and we might very remotely end up having to suspend services again at some point in the future. We are aware that that is a risk. It's difficult to sort of plan and map and quantify it. And I don't want to get into the realms of what if for tonight, but I would like to assure the committee that if the picture changes and if we need to do something different, then we will, and it will be run through the proper channels and it will be fully open to scrutiny to consider going forward. So that's just sort of brief additional background on top of what's in the report, which I think is on the whole quite self-explanatory, but myself and Chloe are here if you have any further questions.
Anything to add from Chloe or Vaughan on that one? No, thank you. Okay, I'm going to open this one up for questions, but I'll start off with a couple questions, comments really. The first one is around extending the sign-up period. As you said, Elizabeth, there's a good chance a lot of people won't want to take the option up in October and will wait until spring to take it up, probably March, something like that, February, March, which leaves them 6 months. Now, I can foresee people saying, I only want to pay for 6 months because I'm only having 6 months service. Now, would the, what would be the attitude there? Is it, no, you've got to pay for a whole year? Or is it, would you consider looking at 6 months, Elizabeth?
Okay, lovely. Now, I hear what you're saying, and this is a question that I've asked a number of times as well. I think it was one of my concerns initially when the previous administration introduced this charge. What we're looking at here is a subscription period. You pay for a year, and whether most residents are not necessarily going to use every single one of those 26 collections. So I could go down that avenue and sort of argue that point. I'm not going to, because I don't like it. I think that that's cheap and I think it's lazy. What is relevant though is the fact that currently under the contract that we inherited, Abasa charges us for a full 12 months garden waste service. So if we're not charging residents essentially 12 months premiums for those collections, we might not be able to actually pay Abasa to perform the garden waste. Now, if this administration is able to negotiate with the contractor who we inherited and reach a different understanding or change those terms, then perhaps that's something remotely that we might be able to explore in the future. But unfortunately, due to the nature of this particular contract, which we've been left with, there's not a lot of wiggle room for me to offer residents a quarterly or half-yearly subscription, unfortunately, and I do regret that. I wish it was different, but that's the position that we're in. I'll look at it when we're able to look at it.
Okay, thank you for that. It was just really to flag up that knowing the problems we've had in the past with things that it could be something that gets raised. I've got Councillor Hamann to come in as well, but I've got a second quick question on her. 11.4 says sign-up period is not extended. There's a risk that the new sign-up website will not be ready due to delays experienced with Barclays setting up the direct debit processing. Now, bearing in mind we've had this in 3 years, and when the administration at the time brought it in, they wanted direct debits, and there was issues with doing the direct debits. The question is, 3 years later, yes, I understand the impact of the COVID, but surely that should have been in place. We should have been having direct debits by now.
I absolutely agree, David, and I think that it is quite sad that when the contract came in under the previous administration, the direct debits weren't set up and they weren't ready to go. It wasn't an out of the box contract. I do understand, and I think members of this committee will understand as well, that there were a number of problems from the get-go with this particular contract, which meant that the focus wasn't on these sorts of service improvements and progressions. It was actually on just getting the service to an acceptable business as usual position, which means that things like developing up-to-date fintech solutions but seem to have fallen by the wayside. And since 2019, we've been working very, very hard to bring this forward. And we're now in that position where I think we started looking at one of the very first things that I asked for was direct debits for the garden waste service to be brought forward. And I think once we got the spike in missed bins that Sam referenced earlier back to normal in the autumn of last year, we started straight away getting to work with Abasa on developing the payment portal and the tech that needed to go around that, and also looking at other measures and improvements we could make within the charging structure for the garden waste. So that work's been going on in the background. COVID has inevitably caused some delays to that being rolled out. There's also a number of issues that Barclays Bank itself as a financial institution, like many banks at this time, has had to overcome. But I'm quite happy that we're in a position that when the contract, the subscription period comes up for renewal, we should be able to invite residents to subscribe and utilise direct debits if they want to, which will obviously make things so much more easy and convenient, and almost drag our garden waste service into the 21st century, where I think everyone will agree it should have been back in 2018 when this contract first kicked in.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hamann, your hand's not up at the moment, but you did have your hand up. Do you wish to come in?
Was that me you're referring to, David?
Yes. Yes, Terry.
Thank you. Just to really, if I can, ask the portfolio holder, when we resumed the collection service, which I think was on the 11th of May, we changed something, didn't we? What we changed was we no longer collected waste from those non-payers. That was a communication that must have slipped past me, that was a change in policy, because up until the 11th of May, or should I say the 6 weeks previous to that, or 3 collections 6 weeks previous to that, the waste from those non-subscribers was being collected. So how did we communicate that to make sure that people did realise? I know we put stickers on the bins with a big sorry on them, but was the communication before that? Did any of that happen?
Okay, I'm a little bit confused, because if there's always been a permanent policy that we're going to collect waste from non-payers, which I think Michael Weeks must surely have introduced under the previous administration, why would the previous administration have introduced a charge for garden waste? That doesn't make sense to me. Now, the position has always been that if you've paid for garden waste, your garden waste will be collected. The stickers are there to essentially give residents a visual cue and to also help the crews and to deal with some sort of negative behaviour, which we saw certainly when the charge was first introduced, where people were putting all of their garden waste bins out together and you couldn't tell who genuinely had paid and who hadn't. Now, there may at times be an operational decision that operatives are going to collect a particular bin or group of bins because one of those residents have paid or a couple have paid, but some of them haven't, and they can't tell the difference. And to avoid complaints and having to go back and collect a potentially unjustified missed bin later on in the day, that sort of thing saves headaches. But there's absolutely never been a policy which says we're going to collect everybody's garden waste, whether it's paid or not. Surely to have such a policy would make a mockery of the Conservative administration's decision to bring in the garden waste charge, wouldn't it?
Couldn't agree more, if I may. However, I think you'll find if you go back and look, that was the case up until 6 weeks previous. All garden waste, I think you'll find, was being collected. And when we ceased collecting on the 11th of May, we stopped for everybody. When we went back again, we then started putting sorry stickers on the top of bins. I have neighbours, I have 2 neighbours who are not subscribing and their bins are regularly emptied. However, since we've gone back to now collecting, they've got sorry stickers on their bins. So I'll leave that in your capable hands.
Okay, and I'm sure that's something we can look at when the Task and Finish group looks at the contract, because the contract always was intended, as far as I was aware of that administration, that you don't pay, you don't get it collected. So I think that's something we will pick up on the Task and Finish group, actually. Tony and then Sam. Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. I won't harp upon the fact that you inherited the contract with the promise to remove the charge, but that's neither here nor there. What interests me is the fact 7.3, the decision was made to actually suspend the service when Bassett was suffering a 10% frontline staff in self-isolation. Now that's 12.6 people, but the thing I wondered was, did it ever get any worse? Did it actually escalate to the point, well, because I can't imagine getting rid of 2 services to our residents actually equates to 12 people. I would imagine they would have been able to manage it. Obviously, how many people did end up actually self-isolating, and what sort of numbers was it? And my secondary question through you, Chairman, is reference the contract. Bursa charges for 12 months. Currently, the service was suspended for 6 weeks. Contractually, where do we stand? Or is that something that's going to come up in the Task and Finish group? Because obviously, I'm looking in my mind as to whether there's any other charges down the line that Bursa can charge us, or is it more money that we're going to lose? Thank you.
All right, I'll take the first one on the numbers first. Okay, so we need to bear in mind when we're looking at this, that it's not just North Herts in isolation. This is sort of, I want to say a new way of working, but I feel that having something like partnered working or a sort of mini version of a joint waste authority isn't really a new way of working, is it? But we're in partnership with another local authority, East Herts. So we've got a workforce that's split across both of those, which means there's shared resource at times. Now, initially, we were doing quite well in the north. We had about 1%, we had essentially one person who was off-site self-isolating on the 16th of March. By the time we hit the 24th of March, we had 6% of our frontline workers, which includes sort of the guys that answer the phones, the guys that do the street cleansing, the waste operatives that you see loading the wagons, but also the drivers of those HGV vehicles, which is a very, very specialised role, and it can be quite difficult to replace those particular operatives. So 24th, we had 6% of our workforce in the north off. In the east, there were 9% off. And by the time we hit the 27th March and then the Monday after the 30th, East Herts had 10% of their workforce off. We went from 6% on the 24th of March to 15% in the north by the end of that week. And then by the Monday morning, we spiked at having 18% of our staff either self-isolating or somebody in their household that needed to be shielded and protected. We've got to think about the split of those employees over the different job roles and whether or not we can continue to provide the service that our residents need with that resource level. But we also need to bear in mind the unpredictability of this particular pandemic curve and what could have happened and where we might have ended up. And my priority was to make sure that a service which we'd only just managed to get back to functioning as something resembling business as usual didn't suddenly crack under the pressure of this global pandemic. So we were in a very, very difficult conversation. I had a number of telephone conversations with officers where they were giving me all of the numbers and all of the data. And I was determined that we had a phased scale back plan and we were not going to do anything other than follow the plan that I sort of decided was going to be the right way. But you can model, you can plan, and then a pandemic will do something completely different. Humans will do something different and knock you for six. And that's what happened. And I think that actually, if we hadn't pulled the garden and food waste service at that point, also bearing in mind the massive increases in our residual waste tonnages and our recycling tonnages as well, because everybody's now working from home, the kids are all off school, so life is condensed into that one household. And those bins are bearing the weight of all the waste that they would normally have, plus what would go in the work and school bins. Our services, I think, could very well have collapsed had we not been able to redeploy the resource that was usually working on the food and the garden waste rounds. I don't have a TARDIS. We can't go back in time and remodel it and see what would have happened. So I don't really want to dwell and play what if, but there were very, very difficult decisions that had to be taken in the heat of the moment. And I'm satisfied that my officers did their best to get me to make a decision that was in the best interests of our residents. And I wouldn't go back and change what we did. On the second point, which is difficult and could sort of cross into some sort of part 2 type areas and could be commercially sensitive, Terry, we're aware of the contract. We're looking at it. We're making sure that our position as a local authority is protected. And we have an arrangement with the BASA, the same as many authorities have with their waste contractors at the moment, to make sure that we are continuing to function and we're not losing out as a result of how they deal with the pandemic, but equally we're being honest with them as a partner and a service provider as well. And I think that's all that I can say on that particular item at this time, but it might be picked up by this committee via other pieces of work in future.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And yes, I was aware that we would straying a little bit close to some part 2 things there when we were talking about absence rates and figures and things. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there on that particular point. Sam, you were to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was looking to bring it back to the recommendation we've got here, which is just about, you know, Liz said it perfectly. We've created almost a consumer style business, and they didn't get a service for 2 months. Well, for any business going, if you don't get a service, you get a refund. It's not, I don't even think this is really a matter of great dispute. We should not be charging people for this period. It's just straight up simple to me. And as Liz pointed out, this is quite likely, I think it's quite likely that we're going to be having to do this again in a few months' time, because there is a distinct chance of another wave of this virus, and we could go to another lockdown and we could have to do it again. I think the right decisions were taken at the right time, and we need to be aware it could happen again. But if people do not get a service, we should not be charging them. And you're going to hear me say something almost exactly the same in the next item.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sam. And that was sort of the point of the 6 months at the beginning as well. So, okay, if we could take, I've got nobody else. I've got Claire wanting to come in on that one. Claire, and then we'll move to the recommendations straight after that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I recognise that it was obviously a difficult time and you needed to make decisions based on the staffing that UBASA had. The only thing that I was scratching my head on is that I know in a 2-week period I was getting 6 collections from my house, because I do subscribe to the Brown Waste Service, and suddenly 3 of my collections were removed, if you like, because that's 2 food wastes and the brown bin. So that's like 50% reduction in terms of people coming round to collect from my door. I mean, had you removed just the food waste but kept brown, I did ask Vaughan Watson whether that had been looked at as an option because it was a paid service, and there was particularly, I was getting a lot of grumbles from residents about the fact that they were paying for a service and weren't receiving it. And of course, with everybody on lockdown at home and in their gardens and the gardens starting to wake up, people were generating an awful lot of additional garden waste and had got nowhere to put it. I think that, so for me, the numbers and why it couldn't have just been take out the food waste, because food waste in terms of volume is quite a small amount of waste that is generated every week. And the food waste could have been put into purple or brown bins, as we know, because Cumberland would have set bins with food waste in them, because we're at the moment when we don't have a contract where food waste has to be separated out. So I think that's the only concern I had, and I understand that there were staffing issues, but it was just the impact and whether or not you looked at trying to minimise the impact to the residents and the services that they expected.
Just before you come back on that, Elizabeth, I think you made quite a good point yourself, Elizabeth, that you've got to try and guess what's going to happen. It is a guess what's going to happen with this thing. We don't really know. They are specialist drivers. I know the little truck that does the food waste has a different qualification driver to the ones that do the big one. And I think from what you've said and what's gone on and it is the job of the Scrutiny Committee to ask these sort of questions, is why that decision was taken and how it was taken.
But Dave,
I think the explanation is that you've got to plan and you've got to look at worst case. In this particular, the worst thing I could have seen was everybody sticking their bins out and then no lorry turns up. So yes, I personally, I think it was the right decision. But Elizabeth, you want to come back on that?
Yes, no, very briefly. The point that you make around the food waste collection, I don't know if everybody's seen it, but it's not a full-sized bin wagon. It's not an HGV. You don't need a specialist license to be driving that. It is a much smaller sort of two-seater, essentially, little vehicle. Sometimes it actually does what we call the farm runs, so up to the less accessible, more rural properties, and we'll pick up the normal waste from those households because the HGVs can't get up there. Now, those drivers cannot be redeployed unless they've got a separate, the HGV training to drive the wagons, whereas the guys that are doing the garden waste are driving the normal bin wagon. So if we take the garden waste off, it frees up those drivers as a resource should we need them due to people self-isolating and whatnot, to actually drive and maintain our residual into which people can put their food waste and our recycling, which are sort of the core statutory services that we have to collect. Garden waste isn't actually something that we are required to by law to collect free of charge. The food waste is, but that can also, obviously, like I said, it can go into the residual, it can be put in a wormery, it can be composted at home. So we had a number of different options. As I said before, I had worked out and sat down with officers and we'd come up with a phased resource management plan. Because of the number of people that ended up having to self-isolate for very legitimate reasons, as we all know, that plan did go out of the window very, very quickly, and we had to make a very, very difficult snap decision. But I appreciate the questions and the scrutiny post-event. I'm satisfied from my background in consumer redress that the recommendation that we've got in this report is fair and reasonable, but I would happily take this committee's recommendations and we can discuss them at Cabinet next week as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Elizabeth. And I think I'm not going to take any more on this one, Claire, because I think Claire, we've done this quite a lot.
Can I just ask one final question on that? Because from what Councillor Dennis-Harbers has said.
No, Claire, I'm time limiting these things because we are getting quite tight and we have got to go into part 2 in that yet. I think we can take this aside, please, Claire. We can take this up outside this meeting if we want to take it a little bit further. But at the moment, I think we've had adequate answers for what the questions that have been asked. I think we've done our job as a scrutiny committee quite well on this and asked these questions. The recommendation we're being asked to consider to Cabinet is that the Council agrees an extension of the current 12 months payment period for green waste collection for a further period of 2 months. The loss of income based on the current 48% uptake is approximately £186,000. Of course, as Elizabeth pointed out, this is an unknown, and Sam reinforced it. It could be worse, but this is where we are at the moment. So I'm going to take a vote on that. Hillary, if you're ready.
Yes, we're ready, Chair.
All those in favour endorsing that recommendation, please indicate now.
Okay, I can see already that that's passed. That's
Thank you very much, Harry. Okay, moving on now to item 16 would be the part 2 report. So we go to item 17. Consider passing the following resolution: that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 and 5 of part 1, schedule 12A of the said Act. We do need to vote on that legally, so please could you indicate that you're happy to move to that next item.
okay. If you can all vote now, that'll be great. Thank you. Okay, I can see it's already that it's passed. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. You will now all be sent an invitation to join the breakout room to discuss the part 2 report. You will need to accept this invitation to enter the room. And I'll remind you again when we come out of it, but there is a specific way to leave it. So you will now all be sent an invitation. Please accept that invitation. Hilary, where does that come up?
I think Vic's going to send out the invitation in a second.
Right.
It does take a little bit of time, I'm afraid, this moving from room to room. So.
Okay, I've got mine.
Councillor Bryant.
Members, what I'll do when I think everyone's back is I will do another roll call just to make sure that you're all back in place.
I'm sorry.
IT manager, would you close the breakout room just to make sure that anybody left is thrown out, as it were? Thank you. So if I quickly do a very quick roll call just to check you're all back, please. Councillor Aspinwall.
Present.
Bryant. Councillor Bryant. No, let's come back to her. Councillor Collins.
Hello again.
Councillor Hone.
Yep, present, correct.
Councillor Hunter.
Present.
Councillor Levitt.
Yeah.
Councillor McNally.
Oh, yes.
Councillor Nash.
Yeah.
Councillor Jakir.
Present.
Hello. Councillor Strong.
Yeah.
Councillor Tyson. Councillor Tyson.
Yes.
Chloe's back.
Yeah.
Chloe, yes.
Yes.
Councillor Dennis Harburg.
Yes.
Okay. So we're just waiting for Councillor Bryant, who's not here.
Councillor Bryant's left the meeting.
Let me just double check. Okay, I'm just asking the IT managers to double check the breakout room to make sure no one's been left behind. Won't be a moment.
If she's lost her connection, maybe
Yeah.
queue to come back in.
Yeah, I had a dropout just as we were leaving the room, and now it's fine again.
Chair, I just had a message from Val saying her tablet is frozen.
Ah, right.
I think there might be some software issue with that breakout room. I had a complete failure just at the end there.
Val has the option of coming in on the phone, doesn't she?
She does, and she has got the number. So
have you got a phone number to contact her on?
I can find it. Let me see what I can find.
I'll message her, David, as well.
Yeah, please, Ian. Yeah.
Thank you.
Apologies, everybody, for the slight delay, but it seems unfair not to let her back into discussion if we can. Okay, are we getting anywhere, Ian?
I've just sent her a message to dial in using the the number that Hillary sent out this afternoon.
Yeah.
Which I think she's seen, but I can't really ring her because she might be ringing.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I can't get through, so she probably is trying to ring. I've tried a couple of times to phone.
Okay, we'll give it another minute or two, just about another minute or two, just to make sure. I did say 5 minutes at the beginning, and we're coming up to that now. No, Doesn't look like it. Okay, then, if Val does manage to rejoin us, then great. Unfortunately, she won't be able to vote because she's not been present for the whole item, but let's go ahead with it anyway. Okay, moving on, agenda item 16. No, sorry, wrong one.
Yeah, no, it is 16. It's the part
16.
one.
Yeah, it is 16.
Yeah.
Going backwards, aren't we? Commercial waste collection. Moving on to that item. We have discussed this item in part 2. Does anybody wish to discuss the part 1 any further than what we have done in part 2? No. Then we have a recommendation, and let me get the wording right with this one, is we have the overview and scrutiny recommends to Cabinet recommendation at 2.1 as contained within the Cabinet report, but also the additional recommendation and comments made within part 2 of this meeting should also be taken to Cabinet. Is that okay, Hilary, with the wording?
I can tidy that up, but that's fine as long as everyone understands what they're voting for.
Thank you. In that case, all of those in favour, please indicate as usual. Those against indicate as usual, etc., etc. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, Chair, I can already see that that's carried.
Right. Thank you very much for that. And that, I believe, concludes our business for tonight. Thank you very much for that. It's quite a long meeting, but I think some of that stuff was rather important that we discuss it in the way we did. So thank you, everybody, for your time. Thank you, Vic, for the technology, which seems to work reasonably well again tonight, including our new breakout room tryout. Thank you, Hilary, for your time. Thank you, everybody, and see you at the next meeting. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.